has its pros and cons. Just see the look and feel and play with it and understand what you could do, what you can't do. That's it, because obviously the images and stuff, it's based on Adobe's own copyrighted or images. Obviously, you won't get that as much comprehensive or some diverse granularity or what do you call the consistency when it comes to Mid-Journey, whereas Adobe is there for you. Just try, see what you can do in trying to be slightly more creative than what you normally do. If you don't have any understanding of the styles or color tone or lightning, etc., that's where you have to go and play with it to understand, hey, what does it do? But if you are an Instagram person, then this could be just a cakewalk for you. If you're like somebody who logs into Instagram maybe a monthly once or something, or no idea about filters and things, then you might learn how the images can be made to look better, even in the best way through this. But play with it and then see, and then whatever you get from that, try to then add it. If you have the Adobe Firefly, Adobe access to Creative Cloud, and see whether you could add text and you could add any more content to it. That's it, Adobe Firefly, that's it for you. So we'll go from there. Today I thought we'll start infographics, because when you touch infographics, there are a lot of you need to get to know the icons, the charts, and so many other things. Or even what are the different types of infographics that you could do, and how do we plan, how do we start. So it's going to be, so rather than to dump everything in one session, the plan is just to have it over 2-3 sessions. So in that way, we could layer this in one at a time. First is an understanding or even finding, that's this is this, and this is good, that's that, etc. So you are building, you have good understanding of design principles as we speak, and you also have a good idea about how what good looks like, what good doesn't look like. And now we are building from strength to create infographics. Well, let me put some basics. Obviously you don't need to be a professional designer, because we are not going to be multi-fledged starting from scratch here. We are going to use templates and few bits to make it look good. So that's it. But what you need to care about is the accuracy and ethics of it, because obviously any data can be presented in any way that might justify anything, right? Notoriously, you can actually go back and anything nicely presented, people will believe it. So in this case, try to ensure your data is accurate as much as possible, and use it in an ethical way. But most important thing is, which we'll cover, is you need to understand your audience a bit better, because not everybody will prefer infographics as a mode. Even then, what the density of what you could cover in an infographics sometimes might go on the other way. And as it stands here, it's like you are not going to be perfect immediately. So we'll be looking into some planning element before we get on point. So you don't need to do research to understand it, but let me say, research says learners spend the most amount of time looking at the text in visualizations, right? So that's important. You might think your icons, your images are great, but people still will be looking into the text within it. So keep in mind. Second, even though we say visuals, people look into text and visuals, still misinterpretation can happen even when the text is accurate. Infographics that are colorful or elaborate are more memorable. So it needs to be visual, it needs to be memorable, but it needs to be accurate as well. Then trouble is just for the sake of doing an infographics, for the sake of doing infographics, just tinkering what's been done previously for something else just because you like the diagram. If you just go back and fine tune it and add it here just because it looks cool, meant like there will have been mistrust between you and your audience. Just be very, very mindful. That's not applicable just for infographics, but to any graphics that you're using, design, anything that you're doing. So testing the visuals is always going to be tricky for you when you just have a look at the target audience or anything before you share, probably. But we'll touch that. If anybody, as you always say, if a 10-year-old is a 6 to somebody who's in year 6 to year 8, 10 to 14-year-old, if they understand what you're doing, then pretty much everybody will understand. So with the foundation principles, because these are, we will go back into some checklist and stuff, but I think it's very easy to create something, but it's important to always benchmark, to understand, why am I creating, what's the end purpose, etc. So these slides are going to be for that purposes. Number one, is it relevant to my audience? Is the data presented? Again, you don't need actually data to present. You don't need actually data to present an infographic. That's first thing. You can actually take something that's very qualitative, and you can do it. We'll also cover that. And then end of the day, whether you're doing top to bottom or left to right or circle or S shape, etc., it just comes in. That's where. So again, these one or two are foundational elements just to give you what good looks like. In this case, we already covered. Your infographic should be accurate, it should be useful, and it should be meaningful. And in between, you are going to find, what happens if it's accurate but not useful, means it's confusing or cluttered, or in this case, it's useful and meaningful means, it's misleading or distracting. Accurate but it's not meaningful means, you are somewhere in between here. So obviously you need to have somewhere in the sweet spot here where it should be accurate, it should be useful, and it should be also be meaningful. Right. So checklist, I'm not going to go too much into this, but this will be a good one. So when you are looking into anything, these are the three buckets that you are looking into this. When you actually see an infographic going forward, or when you actually create an infographic, or your team creates an infographic, or you find something in any report or any article or anything, I just want you to do that. Number one, is it useful? Is it accurate? Is it meaningful? And you just quickly do this, when this could be a nice review process for you. And also there is something before sharing and after sharing. Now, before sharing is even within your team. If you're sharing it, you are checking some important things. Is the message is clear? Is it accurate, as we currently said? Is it clutter-free? We talked about minimalism. We talked about blank spaces. You should now be very good in these things. That's it. So, and again, as it stands, share with few others before you send it for the wider thing. And after you shared it, you just start to work with it. So ideally, what do you do for infographics? The infographics are meant to give quick, skimmable summaries. You have a long form text, or what we call a page, and can you convert that page into an infographics is what you normally do. Again, even though it says 200 to 300 words, the chance of it is going to be, 200, 300 words, you're going to do it very, very quickly. So 500 words is at max, the maximum, even they say it's 200, 300 words. So if you're taking a long form content, which is the common term that they use in marketing, which also includes proposals, then you just need to decide, skim very high level, what's the most important info on this? Because I'm normally, if you have any highlighter, you normally go and you highlight these things, right? Those are the important stuff. Then if you're going to split into any logical parts, where would these logical parts go? Then you just need to sequence it, So you highlight it, okay, in this long form content, in this proposal, in this executive summary, whatever you are working on, what are the key points? Okay, these are the key points. And how am I going to bucket them? Then how am I going to sequence them? So again, these are some of the principles we are going to actually use it as we go forward. But now, as a high level, people might just read your infographic and then make a decision, right? So what is it you need to have? The 3 or 4 things. Yes, it needs to be useful. Yes, it needs to be meaningful. Yes, it needs to be accurate. We know that. But what are some of the clear-cut details? Number one, the title. The title needs to be compelling and descriptive. That should be the title. Short headers, just these are the subheadings, as you call it, then bullet points for each of the subheadings, and finally a call to action. There are enough examples, and I just want you to go back and search infographics like what we did on summaries, and then very quickly start to do some checklist. Right, in this case, here is a simple example. It has a nice headline, and it also has subheadlines, and each of the subheadlines, it also has some bullet points. So primarily what they have done here is they have given a one long from what they call top to bottom. They have it, and at the same time, they also have given a vertical page. In an infographic, sometimes you find things like this, which meant you are not just adding one infographic, you're actually, you understand, okay, fine, I know this how part in a long infographic is not clear. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to zoom it and I'm going to add it next. So this kinds of gives you the 4 principles. If you look here, yes, the title is there, short headers are there, bullet points are there, and then I cut the call to action in this image, but there is a call to action for you. How to work productively at home, 5 steps, practice some of these in steps. Step 1, create schedules, set priorities, set proper tools. define boundaries, practice self-care. All theory, we all know what we need to do, but we don't do it. But again, that's where it comes in. In this case, what you find here is it's slightly more complex infographic, but what they have done here is they have introduced icons, and they've also given you arrows. For example, in the left side, what it tells you is, fine, this is the headline and this is the subheadline, and within that subheadline, instead of giving bullet points, what they've given here is some icons. Icons is like, okay, these are, if you don't sleep properly, which I'm notorious myself, then these are some of the issues that you might face, hypertension, depression, heart diseases, bits and pieces. Then, okay, that's fine. Okay, they've scared me enough. And now, what do? You stick to a sleep schedule and you do what it takes, read a book, be active, exercise, let go 1 hour before, go to bed and do what it takes, relaxing bed rituals, and if you have any timer and so. These are, and very, very quickly, the infographics here is, okay, they've taken an article and they simply summarized an article into an information graphic. So simply, that's it. In this, what's the difference between this and last one? Last one didn't had icons. This one had icons. So gradually, you're going to start to feel the difference. This is the challenging part. While it might be interesting and enticing for you doing infographics, what you might find here is the readability. So you need to understand, well, it's all great for you. Number one, don't use jargon, which meant that terminologies or abbreviations that you're using, don't use. Test the reading level. This is the important point, because what generally happens is, you might think everybody knows what you're talking about, right? So reading level is, that's what, keep it simple in a way. If like a 15-year-old is going to read it, but people say, 12-year-old is better because that's even more specific. So, and what you're going to do. So you just need to understand, who are you writing for? It's a target audience, which we covered. Secondly, don't just underestimate just because it looks good, it's accurate, it's useful, means that they will understand what you're talking. You need to also do a readability thing. We already talked about accessibility. It nicely comes in here. High legible fonts. If you're using sans serif fonts, minimum 18, and try to reduce the jargon and improve the things. This one we are going to cover in depth as we go forward. What I want to cover here is, people tend to think infographics means you need to have data. But as you saw in the two examples that we have, both on the sleep and also the one before, there's no data. This is called the qualitative. You take the qualitative information, then you still present it, present it in a way that's understandable. Quantitative, on the other side, is what we are familiar with. You just take some data sets and you just present the data sets in any number of ways. That's it. So again, you might have heard all these things: pie chart, bar charts, timeline charts, and so many other things comes in there, whereas qualitative is something that we can also start to use, which meant any text-based information that you have, your mind should now clearly, hey, if I'm presenting this information in an infographic, how am I going to do it? That logical understanding that we talked about, right? You just see, okay, what are the key points? Fine. Logically, how am I going to bucket them into something? Now I bucketed, is there any sequence that I'm going to go for this? And that way, the same information, instead of writing it in 800 words, 1,000 words, you're just making it in one nice summary. That's it. So readability, when it comes to readability, this chart nicely represents. Number one, we all have strengths in this, right? We all have strengths in this. Data literacy is not about, because it's very, very, very important. Some of us might be very good in interpreting data, which is reading the data. Means you can send accountants, lawyers, you name it. They are very, very good in reading the data, which meant you give them some complex information, they'll be able to read the data and they are going to be able to find some insights out of it, right? Whereas there are other people who will be very good in working with data, the Excel people, traditionally, and business analytics, business intelligence type of people. They'll be very good in working with data, not necessarily they'll be very good in the other one, which is communicating with the data, which is the reporting and presentation, which meant, so these three things needs to work. And we all have strengths and weaknesses on this. while some of us might be very good in working with data, not necessarily we will be very great in actually finding, this is the great data. What is it that might be interesting for these people? And let me take the data and report it in that way. That's a skill set in itself. And then, okay, now I've reported the data. What will they read and analyze with this, right? So understand in 3 different perspectives. So working with data, communicating with data, reading with data, which meant your data literacy might be at different levels. This is exactly the same thing that's applicable to your user as well. Because remember, they are not working with the data, they are just reading the data. So your way of communicating with data should ensure that reading the data should be fairly straightforward for them, right? So that's the reason they are telling it's important for you to write it in a way for a 12-year-old or something, so that reading the data becomes very, very simple. Unless you are writing it to an accountant or an investor or analyst, etc., where it becomes, they are those guys, their only job is just to crunch or read data, that's it. So let's build the building blocks, even before we start. Now you have, some way or the other, you are just created an infographics without you just logically took the information, you just created an infographic. But then the question is the, you just need to ask yourself, for accuracy, meaningful, useful, is the data from a reputable source? Yes. Is it open or restricted or unavailable? Okay, fine. Is the data set the right one for the job at hand? Which means sometimes we might pick up some data and add it to people and then say, okay, this is it. But then they'll be scratching their head and saying, nah, this is not what I'm looking for. So, and finally, is it cleaned? Most of the time, this has always been a challenge in our research company, which meant there are so many companies who provide open data, which is much, much easy. So much blurbs, repetition, duplicates, unfiltered information there. And so easy. Some charge as free, some give up to £10,000, where they cleanse a little bit. Whereas we take the data, we cleanse the data, we document the source, we do everything, aggregate it, normalize it, you name it. And then people's expectation will be, we'll pay you £2,000 for this. Where with the open data itself is £1,000. And you are taking it, cleaning and doing it. It's because the audience that you're selling are so used to reading the what we call the open data. So when you go back and you cleanse data, the perception is they don't understand the full fledged of it. So you just need to ask yourself or explain yourself, yes, this is where the data originated. It's from open. It's what happened. It's internal, it's external, it's restricted. Ensure you ask these questions, because again, it's fairly straightforward. It's only when you try to do it, then you come out with this. Again, these could be theoretical for now, but once we start to do it, you're going to find it how all these things fall in place. So again, now if you're looking into the content as, I'm reading the data, what is it? What is it I'm missing here? There are many different ways of doing it. Now, we already covered, you need to know the source, which is like, okay, within the infographics, am I going to describe about the data? Yes, you should. How many words? Maximum 500 words. How are we going to present the data? Are you going to present an average, or you're not going to present an average, or something else? Compare the data, etc. You need to think, is it going to be I'm taking just the text and converting that into a nice, usable visual format to them, or I have this data set, what exactly am I trying to do? Remember, if you are working with the data, you should think about reading the data. It's like so which meant you need to think about reporting. So what you're actually going to do here, part of the reporting, what are you going to actually share it to them? If you're just going to do it again, if you're just using Excel and other tools, the tools are smart enough now with the new Copilot within Microsoft, which they'll be launching in the next month or so. It's already, time is up. You're going to see the Excel, the Copilot would automatically tell you, hey, I've already scanned through it. These are all some of the insights that I have it for you, because you don't need to think anymore. It's actually, if you send it the raw data, it automatically crunches it and tells you, hey, you know what, as far as I know, these are some of the things that it tells you, so primarily. But if it doesn't tell you at the moment, you still need to extract the data and come up with it. So example is this one. And clearly see what happens here is over the years, a timeline graph. And the timeline graph, what it tells you is, okay, fine. There are the three different options. If we continue to operate in the same way as average, we are going to get there. If you're on a low forecast, low sales, we are going to go down. And if you're going aggressively, then from 2021, which just seems to be their anchor point, just going to go up all the way to 2025. So what it doesn't have is on the x-axis they have given, but on the y-axis they haven't given what should the revenue differential on this. But it's a starting point. So it tells you, okay, the source from where it comes from. It tells you, okay, this is the graph, and it also tells you the three options, sales projection. So it's nicely done, but it could be done better. This is the beginning of it. Whereas this one has both X and Y axis. You might think this is not an infographic, this is just a graph. Still, you are just taking it, putting it in a format, but remember, you are making it as an image and you're sharing it. So that's it. So primarily, what it helps you is two things. Number one is, this sales by customer. Number of units sold is on the x-axis, and the revenue that you're going to generate on the top axis, which meant what it tells you is the type C is it starts at, if it's a low value product, it comes there. Then you have a mid value product, which also means you're also selling more, which is 10 to 15 units sold, and it comes to 10, 20 million. And then you have some high value products on the very top. That's like, it just tells you, this graph doesn't actually give me much. It just confuses me more than what it is. But obviously, there might be somebody who has sit and thought, this is amazing, let's just go and do it. So they haven't tested the readability. They haven't thought about what exactly is the message that I want to convey here. It might be beneficial if they might have split up just to one. Just type A, talk about it, type B, talk about it, type C, talk about it. Or if there is any commonality between, they could have talked about it, but it's just there. Well, you can get reports to show sales by, it's not always a total picture. You might find out that's the thing that's written here. So having the ability to look at profitability of a type of customer is helpful. That's the agenda. So what they're telling here is, hey, why are we doing more of A when we know if we focus on C, it's larger value revenue, and also meant that we are selling more. Why can't we do the more of it? Maybe diversification, etc. But it doesn't tell me much. So I know it's dense. That's why we are splitting them into three parts. So I'm going to give you one of the most popular infographics, and then we stop there, and then we'll continue the rest next week, and then we'll follow that up with the week after as well. So we gradually move up with this. So for now, you need to know the basic building blocks, right? It's like it needs to be useful, it needs to be meaningful, and it needs to be accurate. Then you need to also think about the readability. And also you need to also understand, when your accuracy, etc., I just need to think where, what's the source of it. And you also need to think about, few specific elements about words and other things. So you have a ballpark idea about how to do infographics, and if you have a long form content, or you simply take the long form content and you just understand what are the important points here, how am I going to bucket them, categorize them, and how am I going to sequence them in a nice order. Not necessarily it needs to be on top to bottom. You could also go left to right, and any form. That's it. Then we also looked into the types of data. You don't need data to do that. You can actually use it, without data, quantitative, qualitative. So it just gives you an overview, infographics. But now let us start to look at, from now on, these are like 80-85% of the graphics are around this. So you're going to look into these things all the time. From now on, as mentioned, I just want you to understand or test it, checklist, ding, 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 ding. I didn't like it. I don't understand this readability test fail. How am I doing in my data literacy, etc. You'll be very good in those things. But secondly, part of this, you also will be familiarizing yourself in understanding that's a statistical graph. This is this graph, that's that graph, etc. So let's start with this. So you have an traditional, what we call a statistical infographic. This is like, there's a lot of numbers, and it talks about obesity on the side. So infographic is a graphic that is used to communicate information, often information that's complex in one way or the other. That's the whole point. But as I mentioned, you don't need to have an information in the first place to actually share it as well. So let's have a look. The very first one is statistical, which you already know. You just have some stats and you just want to share that stats in a nice order. This is the most common form where you have a large data set and you simply need to say, okay, these are the top 10 customers. And in the top 10 customers, the top one has 11% of the revenue within the portfolio that I'm operating. The top 5 contracts are XYZ. And the next upcoming renewals are this. So you're going to see if you're looking into sales angle, that's why in this case, it talks about obesity, full of stats. You'll be picking that up very, very quickly. It's based on statistics. So again, it's still a top to bottom thing. It tells you a lot of percentages and stuff. What it tells you is you always need to look for story behind the data. And then we already had very early on, we just said, okay, you could just take the content, nice headline. Does it have a headline? Yes, it has a headline. Second, does it have a small sub headlines? Yes, it has sub points. Within have a sub headlines. Does it also have some bullet points? Yeah, it ticks all the boxes. It also has some icons with it. So that's it. So it sometimes we might find the icons is actually going to mess things up as well. In this case, the choice of icons should actually match with what we're doing. We are going to have a separate session on icons at the very end, but for now, it has a headline, it has things, and it talks about a lot of stats and percentages. That's it. So it has a descriptive title. Normally, it's always better to have a number on your title, right? When you don't have a number, then you don't understand. So in this case, there is no number, but it starts on the top, very dense. Whereas in this case, as you can see here, clean, just 2 colors, and they're just nicely statistical infographic. Second one is informational infographic. You might be thinking, is it not the same one? Yes, in this case, informational infographic is what I meant is there is no, as you can see here, there is no data here. You're just taking this could be nice for your value proposition and stuff. What are the 3, 4, 5 things that you're going to do? This is what you're going to do, is clearly communicating a specialist concept or an overview of a topic. And most importantly, as you can see here, it's very, very nice for you to summarize a blog or a report or a presentation or anything there. So normally it gets bucketed into 4 or 5, but it's always important in an information graphic where it's nice rather than to just add in different colors. In this case, it looks very nice, different colors, but to also even more differentiated, they've added some nice icons. They've also added some numbers. So that's a very nice thing. So people remember that people always tend to like infographics with numbers on the title. I already told you that. So that's information graphics. Then you just go back. Remember, you don't need to actually have a chronological order like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can actually go back. It's like as long as you have a headline, yes, headline is there, sub-headline, bullet point, you can actually go back and present it. And this way, this is centralized. So before it was on the top, now it's centralized, that you could opt for a circular layout as well. So again, gradually you start to think about these things. Information graphic. In this case, what you also find here is, they have chosen 3 different colors, and they've mixed up 3, 1 to 3, 1 to 3, 1 to 3 colors. They also have some separators that they have separated it, and it has 9 ideas. So very, very clear. Sub-headlines thing, 3 points, jingo, job done. So whether they want to number each section or whether they want to do separate headings, alternate between different colors, it's entirely up to you. But also ensure your icons come. So informational graphics, it doesn't have data, totally opposite to the statistical graphic. Timeline graphic, you're also going to get it in this case. So timeline graphic, this is the old timeline that I lifted, but primarily what you can find here is goes from left to right normally, and it tells you what happened when. When you talk about history or when you talk about evolution, especially when you're talking about your contract mobilization or operation, what will you do in year 1 of operation, year 2, year 3, or year 4, year 5? When you give back the contract, what's going to happen? So it's a nice way of enabling it, your project plan, etc. It just comes with it. So it's always better to go from left to right and think about whether you can use icons and stuff. But that's it. So typically timeline uses a central timeline with different events on the timeline. So again, this could easily get cluttered. So just be very, very mindful. 1 year or 1 month it's better. If you're going week by week and stuff, you might be missing the plot here. So timeline graphic, again, you don't need to just go, you have a couple of examples here. In the previous example, it is a one-line thing where it's horizontal layer, whereas in this case, it's same horizontal layer, but the year goes up and down. What they have done here is similarly what they have done in the past. They have added different colors, right? 3 colors, just telling them like every year passes, there is something changes. Or in the other case, alternating between different colors at each point. And like what we have done on the 3 separators, they've used 4 colors and they've just mix matched the 4 colors all the way along, right? So any different way, timeline could be horizontal, timeline could be vertical. Typical test, headline is there, sub bullet points is there, and then it talks about it. So if you have more than for example, 1 year, 1 point, 1 month, 1 point, 1 week, 1 point. Don't try to add too many within it. This is timeline graphic. It clearly tells you there is central timeline. Each point illustrate with an icon if possible. Provide a description of each point. So again, process infographic. 4th one, this again, it's very, very common where you just say, okay, what's an infographic? We'll be using Venngage. So most of the examples, most of the stuff that I'm talking about is from Venngage. So because, it's very, very friendly. Yes, you can do infographics within Word, PowerPoint, etc. But you know what? It takes long. Whereas infographics for the first 5 designs, it's free. After that, it's still very nominal. And because it understands different types of it, we are going to look into this. So the timeline will highlight the points. The process graphic, it's very clear. It just summarizes the different elements of your process. So again, I'm not going to go in details. It's just there. And your process could very well be, as it mentions here, if it goes arrow, you have the arrow, or you could go with an S-shaped or a snake layout as well. So very, very common, different ways. Again, think about this in your mind for now. I just want you to understand that's an information graphic. That's a statistical graphic. This is a process graphic. This is a timeline graphic. Yeah, that's all you need to do. And primarily, you will get to it. You'll know. Geography graphic as it stands here, this is where the challenge always comes in. As you can clearly see, there are countries like India and others, Brazil and others are actually much larger, but politics kicks in, and North America is big, Russia looks big. So, and some continents are very small. So again, think it through. And normally the point here is, which I'll touch, when you're doing graph in geography graph, just use some standard pattern. In this case, you have a map that's based on geography. Usually when you have a map, follow the same consistency. There are other ways of looking at is you can use the same geography map and you can just pinpoint some of the icons from that. Again, this is one. The other one is this. In this case, raise populations. There are very, very interesting graphics that I found, and they all have different types. Raise populations in major American states, it's like where do people stay more and other things. So geographic infographics used to compare data by region as well. So in this case, what they've done is it's theoretical, right? It doesn't have stats, it doesn't have timeline, etc. But what it tells you is, different regions. In this case, if you are working in a multi-regional bid, where if you're servicing in 5-10 different locations, how can you present those 10 different locations? You could choose an American graph here if you're working in the US geography, or you can use any other geography, and you can pinpoint as it currently done here, and you can write what you're going to actually do it here. On the other way, you're also going to do it here. You can pinpoint the particular states, and you can write it here, or countries. You can write it here. That's a geography thing. Use it to understand, but always remember, if you're using, it's always northern part. Northern countries are slightly bigger compared to the southern countries. But if you're working on projects that are based on the southern hemisphere, then their way of looking at the map might be slightly more different. So just keep that in mind. So that's what we covered. Comparison infographic. This is another one. So I just picked up something at the very last minute. This is it. So primarily, between X and Y. If you have an option A and option B, you could compare it. If you most of the websites use this, I have 3 different options. And if you subscribe to this, you get 1, 2, 3. If you subscribe to this, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you get premium one, you get everything. Find it all the time. That's your comparison infographic. It's a table, but it's presented in a different way. And this one, what you have done here is, salmon, contrasting colors. You can do the same comparison. They have chosen blue and they have chosen kind of an orange, and they've given you the different layers. You can also use it this way. And finally, comparison. If it's more than 1, 2, then you can start to compare like this. What happens here is we have different customers. This is very useful even for us. So customer use type 1, user signs up, goes through onboarding, gives up. User signs up, goes through onboarding, continue use the tool only as a free user, always happens. User signs up, goes through onboarding, user continues until premium feature needed, upgrades to premium. User signs up, user goes through onboarding, user upgrades immediately, continues as a business user. Like in Scribble, for example, most user stays in customer type 2. Customer type 2, they just stay there. So we don't really push hard to make them into premium subscribers, where it's just only $25, but that's it. So again, this kind of things meant like not everybody, this is like an account plan. When I did this graphic, I realized, I haven't even customized or segmented the users within Scribble or within Rain, our other company. But it was eye-opening. So in your case, when you compare what you're going to do, this is the, you can also use this comparison to just say, sometimes you will have, you will be asked to do, okay, can you share, the compliant bit, and then you also share what you call a innovative bit. In that case, you can use this to also share. Compliant bit covers tick, tick, tick. Innovative bit covers a lot more. So you could use the very basic format that's written like this, or you could have 2 different things like we are talking about here, or you could go back and do this, right? So that's your comparison infographic. Hierarchical infographic, already all these things. Your organization structure is a basic example of hierarchical. Everybody know Maslow's thing. What happens? I think people make decisions based on different elements, but normally, this is it. It's important for you to be happy, important to be respected, important to have people around you. Do you have a safety net? Then you can make a lot more, and physiological means that you any other logistical support that you need. So that's a very basic principle of hierarchical infographic. Again, when you start to use it, learning was interesting. For example, what we are currently doing is a lecture based. Any other format that we are going to podcast format or anything, gradually the more and more they do themselves, they practice by doing, and most importantly, they teach others. That's what we learn. So again, a different way of pyramid. Immediately you can follow a hierarchical pyramid. Organization structure, we already had a look. List is another thing. List is like, okay, it's mostly like, your features of a company. So this is how it works. So these are the 10 things that we do, and we are going to list all the 10 things. In this case, phone apps within iPhone, list infographics. You can create something very basic in here, just one color, but you are just the same text. But again, I didn't really get it, because the text is not visible, readability, it goes down, but at least the headlines, headlines is nice. The pointers, sub-bullet points are okay, but the other point, it was hard. Maybe I've added it here. Maybe if they printed it and added as a bigger sheet, it might be beneficial. So this is one. List infographics, this is a much better one, where it also tells you other things. Just because the content is a list, these are the 3-4 things that you do, type of chemical reactions you're talking about. You can also add it like this, 5 different things. And finally, these are the 4 or 5 things. Normally use it as a feature. When you're using it as a feature, these are the stuff. Just understand, again, be very, very mindful. The very first feedback, we are changing our web designer as we speak for the other website, because we want to make it premium. And the very first thing that he said, that is, you are given a dark, it's a white background, and then you are given a black text. where you haven't used your blue background at all in your website. Why? And I was like, yeah, good question. Or your dark gray. You haven't used it, okay, now you can go and implement, use styles and stuff. But again, it's a very simple thing. But remember, list features, any features you have is the one. So points here, number the points, the bullets, exactly the same thing. And this, the final one is this. Before we close for today, I know it's been very dense. We close for today, and then we'll go deeper more as we go forward. So people use infographic resumes as well. If you haven't used, I suggest you start to use. Go back to Engage again. I suggest you go take a template from there. It's free, and then see whether you can present it. And again, within Baachu, we do the same. When any consultant or anybody who just we don't pick up as many projects as we used to do, but then we used to have 50, 60 freelancers in our books, and then my resource manager used to keep in touch with them, and we take their CV, we rebrand them into our template, and we do it. We didn't even know Engage and other tools existed, because it's fine. We had a designer in the team, document designer, him or her does it. But in your case, different types of things. Can you, instead of sending a text-based resume, can you do something clever like this? And also, same time, your customer, if they are asking for CVs of your key stakeholders within the business, can you do something like this? Again, there are two different ways. There are many different templates that you can do. Normal one there, or you can go like this. This is the format that we use, and you can also try this format. So 9 different infographics. So I just want you to be, just understand the building blocks of infographics, which you already saw. Useful, accuracy, meaningful. Then how can you take one or two of your dense content that you already have, and then see how you can logically present it. Which type. We are going to go back and use what type of information, and it will be used for what. So there are some that are fairly okay. For example, if you have a qualitative information, then you can use information graphic, which is what we looked at, right? Timeline graphics. Process, step 1, 2, 3, 4, process type of graphics. Geography is similar, comparison is fine. Hierarchical is there. List is the features and benefits. Resume is also clear. Statistical is that's a traditional way of looking into things. Process is process. So I just want you to go back and look, and then say, even without checking, that's a process infographic. Yes, the overall layout might be the same, but in your case, I just want you to do that checklist, use the checklist to understand readability checklist, the data literacy checklist, and also, very basic checklist that we talked about, let's say meaningful, useful, and accuracy, whether they put the sources in, whether they talked about it, whether they have the high level headline on the top, sub bullet points, subheadlines, how are they using icons and bits, and just be familiar with it. The more you understand, remember the 3 levels. You either have to work with the data, you then have to read the data, and the third one is you have to create the reports. We'll get to creating the infographics, but for now, familiarize yourself reading the stuff. So this is where we'll begin tomorrow. Next time when we meet, and we go from there, another session. But for now, that's infographics. Start from there. Familiarize yourself what it is around you, the world around you, what can you do, what you can't do, where can you use it, what's already been done, etc. And we'll gradually go from there. That's it for today.